I might need another one. So with the coronavirus restrictions all over the world and especially in Australia right now, one of the challenges we faced is that my 7-year-old could no longer go to the library to borrow books. And he's just started reading, is really excited, so he was quite unhappy about that. That's when I started exploring the e-catalogs that these libraries offer, and they have actually got a wide range of books, even here in Australia, that you can borrow online. But I didn't really want him looking at an LCD screen for that long because it can strain out your eyes quite a lot. So that's when I started looking at some e-readers, because these are great. The screens don't actually strain your eyes out any more than reading a book does, and they've got built-in lights, so they're also quite convenient. The only thing is that the way these interact with the local libraries is different in each country. So I'm going to cover that off, how that works in Australia versus in the US and so on. I'm going to cover off price, features, availability. So I'm hoping that this helps you, get into reading if you don't already read, or if you do, then I'm hoping it exposes you to the convenience of having an e-reader. So I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So we're going to do a three-way comparison today between the Kindle Paperwhite, the Kobo Libra H2O, and the Kindle Oasis. And I've picked these three models because I think they represent a really good spread in terms of the e-reader range, from entry level, mid-range to top of the range. And let's start with pricing to begin with. So the Kindle Paperwhite starts off at 139 Australian dollars. The Kobo Libra H2O retails for 269, and the Kindle Oasis retails for 399 Australian dollars. Before I continue, I just want to say, if you watch my reviews, you enjoy them, get some value out of them, please click that subscribe button up at the top. It really motivates me to keep making more of these videos, and also it helps me get tech from these companies on loan for reviews instead of having to buy new things constantly. So let's start with the Kindle Paperwhite. So what you're going to get for 139 Australian dollars with this is, well, first of all, being a Kindle device, it is an extremely reliable e-reader. It doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that you would find on these two, and let's go into the details of what you're actually missing out to begin with. So you're going to get a 6-inch screen instead of 7-inch on these readers. That's one thing. The second thing is that you're not going to get the color temperature adjustment that you get on these. So there is actually a way with the newer readers where you can reduce the blue light emission and make the screen more yellow, or give it more of a warm tone, which is really going to help you fall asleep a little bit easier at night in theory. And I do find that it does affect sleep a little bit. If you have a screen that's predominantly blue instead of yellow, it does make a difference and have a bit of an impact on your sleep at the end of the day. Now, you are not going to be able to integrate this with the library. Being a Kindle device in Australia, you can't actually connect these to the libraries directly using Overdrive, which is the platform supported in the US for library borrowing. In Australia, you're not going to be able to do that, but there is a way to get library books onto this reader, and I will make a video about that separately. So if you have a Kindle device, any of the Kindle devices, and you want to borrow ebooks from the libraries and get them onto this device, you can do it. It's just not as easy, right? And we'll see how that works a little bit later on when we're doing the Kobo Libra H2O review. Now, other than that, the functionality is basically the same really between these. The only difference is that it does not have these hard page turn buttons. As you can see, you're just gonna have to tap on the screen and flip forward like that. Next, let's talk about the Kobo Libra H2O. Now the Libra H2O was kind of modeled with the same probably design as the Kindle Oasis, where they wanted the page turn buttons to be on the side where you can sort of grab it and give you a pretty good grip on the reader, and also have those buttons accessible to your thumb. They work really well. I think there's despite the plastic build, everything on this reader works really well. And the highlight of this, if you're an Australian consumer, is that this does integrate directly with your library. So if I go in here, for instance, more, and I say settings, and I can just select Overdrive, and I can actually connect this to my library directly. So that means I'm going to be able to borrow ebooks without cost, for a limited time, where I can keep them, read them, and return them just as you would with a normal physical book. And that works in Australia with Kobo, and it only works with Kobo. So if you're an Australian consumer and you want to integrate tightly with the libraries, then this really is the only way to do it. so you have to go with a Kobo device. Now, other than that, this has a couple of other nice features. If you're reading a book, as you're reading, you can actually adjust the brightness up or down by sliding your finger on this little left section here. So it's sort of like a gesture. You know how you had gestures on Android? It's exactly the same thing. You slide your finger up and down, and it kind of just adjusts the brightness, which is really handy, especially given that this does not have automatic brightness adjustment like the Kindle Oasis. So you're going to be able to go in here and change the brightness manually if you want to, or you can use that gesture. Now this does have natural light, as that's what Kobo calls it, but it's really, you know, the feature where you can make your screen look yellower than than normal, in order for you to be able to fall asleep a little bit easier at night. So, and that does happen automatically. You can set up a schedule as well. You can say you go to bed at 11 p.m. and you actually, want the screen to go yellower as you approach that time. So that's really nice, actually. I quite like that. And everything else between this and the Kindles is pretty much going to be the same thing. You get a nice clean UI. I think with the Kobos, the settings and everything else, it's the layout is a little bit different, but they do pretty much exactly the same thing, other than those points that we've talked about. So let's talk a little bit more about what you're getting with the Kobo Libra H2O for your extra $130 if you so choose to spend it over the Kindle Paperwhite. Now you're getting a bigger screen. It's 1 inch bigger, but it does make quite a bit of a difference, I would say. You're getting physical page turn buttons, and you're getting a library integration. I must say that the quality of this reader overall for this price is really good, and also the value for money proposition, given that you're getting so many more things on top of the Kindle Paperwhite, for an extra $130. Yes, it does seem almost like doubling the price, but really speaking, if you want to borrow books from the library, it's really convenient. Now there are a couple of caveats. Having said all of these things about this, I've said a lot of nice things about the Kobo, I feel. A couple of caveats. Now the library integration works well, but I feel like when I'm searching for books here, and my son has pointed this out several times, they don't actually have the full catalog here for some reason. It seems like a subset of the catalog they offer on the app. But on the other hand, you can also download the Libby app or the Overdrive app on your mobile phone and borrow books there, and then this basically syncs up with your phone, as you go. So you press the sync button, and then as long as they're in your Overdrive account and you've added them there, this is going to then download the books. So it works pretty seamlessly. I've had some hiccups here and there, but generally speaking, it works quite well. Now let's talk about the big guy here, the Kindle Oasis. So all the limitations that apply to the Kindle Paperwhite that I've talked about previously in terms of not being able to connect to the library in Australia also apply to this device. So, just by virtue of you having to pay a bit more money doesn't mean that you're now going to get more functionality in that sense. So that just leaves the practical usage aspects of this reader that you're going to get over the Kobo, and obviously you're going to lose the library functionality. So let's talk about this a little bit. Now first of all, this has the flush screen, if you can really see that. This screen is flush. It's made of glass. It feels really nice actually when you hold it in your hand, and then they also have these sort of flip covers for it. It's also got a recessed back, and this makes a huge difference actually in terms of grabbing this device for longer periods of time and reading it. This feels really good in your hand when you're holding it, because it kind of your fingers sit sort of against this notch and it gives you something to hold on to. This has the full spectrum of features that you would probably see on any e-reader. You have automatic brightness, so if I go into a darker room, this is going to go dimmer. If I go into a brighter room, it's going to go brighter. So you don't have to worry about brightness as if you're moving from room to room or from one environment to another. Even the warmth, because that can also be set up on a schedule just as you can with the Kobo. So what are you getting on top of what you're paying for your Kobo on this reader, and what are you losing? I think that's also an important point in this case. So what you're getting is this sort of really premium feeling, almost Apple-esque device. If I pop this out, you'll be able to see that this is no short of an iPad in terms of its construction. Look at it. It's got the metal back. When you hold it in your hand, it really feels quite different to the Kobo. But other than that, other than the premium feel, if that doesn't really matter to you, you are losing the library integration, and I think that's a that's a huge loss in my opinion, because then you're not going to have to sort of muck around with having to sideload books and using different softwares on your laptop. It's not a very complicated process, but it's just still not as convenient as being able to browse and borrow books from your e-reader itself or from your mobile phone. Other than that, the screen seems a little bit clearer to me in terms of how the text appears on the screen itself as compared to the Kobo. The fact that it's flush also feels nice when you're turning pages. So if I'm sort of flipping a page, my fingers don't bump into the edge. It just seems like a much smoother experience. I would probably describe this as sort of the Rolls-Royce of e-readers in a sense. And yes, you're having to pay a premium price for it, but if you read a lot, then it really is worth it in my opinion, because this does really impress me with its quality and the way it feels in my hand. Now let me just quickly talk about ecosystem across these three. So if you're not borrowing from the library, outside of that you're going to be buying books. Now with these two, you're going to be looking at the Amazon store in order to buy your ebooks, and with this one you're going to be looking at the Kobo store. I've generally found that, at least when browsing from Australia, the Kobo store seems to have a lot of books, but they're also a little bit more expensive than the Amazon store. So the Amazon store seems to be quite competitive in terms of pricing, and sometimes the difference can be up to 20 or 30% of the price of the book. So it really depends. I know this will vary between genres, and different types of books that people like to read. But in my experience, reading kids' books and fiction novels, the Amazon store definitely seems to have almost the same variety and a cheaper price on nearly all the books. Now let me quickly talk about the hardware features of each one of these. So there's not a lot to talk about here with the Kindle Paperwhite. There's one button down at the bottom, and there's a micro USB port for charging. And other than that, it's got this rubberized back, and overall pretty simple device. It does what it says on the cover, and works really well. It's got all the buttons it needs. You've got the single physical button, everything else is on the screen. Now with the Kobo, you've got these physical page turn buttons which you can configure a few different ways. You can also hold this in a landscape mode and read it like that. That's all in the settings. And then when you flip the reader around, you've got this power button, which is quite nice, although interesting choice of placement here, where your fingers actually on the other side, but it's not a big deal. I mean, if you have a cover, then you're just gonna sort of close the cover and the reader goes off, so it's not really a big deal in terms of the placement of the button itself. But nice feeling device, all plastic, so it does feel a little bit cheap in your hand, I guess you would say. And then with the Kindle, you've got the physical page turn buttons, and then just a single button up at the top here to switch it off if you're not using a magnetic cover, and then just a micro USB port down here at the bottom for charging. Now, which reader should you buy? So to explain this further, I guess I'm kind of going to use a car analogy, right? So just think of these as different cars. Now the Kindle Paperwhite is more like your Toyota Corolla. It's reliable, it'll get the job done. It's not flashy, it's not going to be able to fit your dog and your pram and 4 kids and all that, but for a small family, good enough, gets you there, gets you back. It's not going to break down, it's not going to it's going to last you a long time. Now the Kobo Libra H2O, I would say, is more like a you can think of it like a Kia Sorento maybe. Yes, it's a 7-seater, it's got the big screen, it's got some of the bells and whistles, it's got the buttons, all that sort of stuff. It is sold at a really competitive price as well, so it'll get the job done. It's going to never fall short of anything you expect from it, but it's not going to feel fancy at the same time. And then I would say the Kindle Oasis is more like your Audi Q7, which not only is it going to do what it says, but it's going to do it with a bang. And it's going to feel really premium every time you hold it, and it's going to really remind you that you've paid a premium price and you're going to get a premium device in return. So it really depends on what you prefer, how often you read to begin with. If you're an occasional reader, I would say that the Kobo Libra H2O really represents the best balance of the lot, and I would probably not get anything other than this if I wasn't such a frequent reader. Now my son actually uses this because he goes through these books quite quickly, so it's much easier for him to borrow them on the library website, whereas I use the Oasis because for me reading a book takes a week or 2 weeks at least, and I don't finish books often enough for it to be a chore for me to have to borrow it from the library website and side load it onto my Kindle. So it really depends on what kind of reader you are, how often you read, what your preferences are. Do you want to travel with it? Do you do you need that portability? Because this is quite big. It feels a little bit chunkier as well than something like that, for instance. This is probably a lot more portable, and if you travel very often, you want something that's really handy, doesn't take up much space, then this might be your guy. And overall, yeah, if you're a frequent reader, you want a premium feeling device, definitely shell out for the Kindle Oasis. It's going to last you for a long time, but keep in mind that in Australia it's not going to integrate with the library. If you want still a frequent reader and you definitely want this library integration, which I think is really awesome, by the way. I mean, for you never to have to actually leave your home to borrow a book, you can just, if one fine day you don't feel like getting out for whatever reason, now we've got coronavirus restrictions here, as I mentioned earlier, that you can't get out of your house, then this is the perfect device for you. Is it going to feel premium? No, it's not, but it's still going to get the job done. And if you're just starting off, if you've got a kid, if you're in the US again, then the Paperwhite offers a lot more value than any of these other devices, because this still then integrates with the libraries there. But in Australia, I think the Kobo Libra H2O is a big winner. Now, I hope you enjoyed this comparison. If you did get some value out of it, please consider leaving a comment down below, or liking, or clicking the subscribe button. And I'm going to be making more detailed videos of the various different functional aspects of each of these, so do watch this space, and have a great day ahead.